What's up, pack members? It's Weird Spirit the Alpha here, and welcome to another video. So this video is going to be quite different than my other videos. So after watching Odd One Out's video called Growing Up Without Cable, it inspired me to do my own little version of it. However, unlike Odd One Out, I'm not going to be focusing on PBS Kids. I'm going to be focusing on my own channel of choice, and that channel of choice is Noggin. For those of you who don't know, Noggin was a really old broadcasting service, and nowadays it's called Nick Jr. Yes, technically Noggin and Nick Jr. did exist at the same time, but Nick Jr. only had a few shows, while Noggin had, most of the shows, pretty much all of them. And, then at some point, a good few years ago, maybe it was even back in 2010, something like that, the, two companies or two channels kind of merged into one, and now it's just Nick Jr. And I'm gonna be honest here. I've seen a lot of shows from Noggin come and go. In fact, I actually still remember them, or I remember a good bit of them. And in all honesty, I guess that's one of the joys of being born in the 2000s, because you got to experience all these very unique kind of kid shows on Noggin. For those of you who did not grow up in the 2000s and didn't get to experience Noggin, then, well, I'm sorry for you guys. Because it wasn't the best, but it was still kind of entertaining in a way. So here's what I'm going to do. Pretty much, I've looked through a few of the shows, and I've picked about 10 of them that I want to discuss. Now, I am going to try to keep my discussions as short as possible, because I am doing this off the top of my head, so I didn't script anything. But I did, however, make a list of the 10 shows I want to discuss, because, just so I don't forget them. But anyway, let's go and get started, shall we? But also, just so you know, this is my personal opinion. So if you remember any of these shows and want to state your opinion about them, tell me down in the description below, or down in the comments below. So let's get started, shall we? So the first show I want to discuss is called Dora the Explorer, and pretty much this was one of the shows that I watched a little bit as a kid, which I think I enjoyed it as a real young kid, but then not too long after I lost interest in it. It just wasn't that unique or interesting to me. Pretty much the whole idea of the show was about a little girl named Dora and her random talking monkey companion named Boots. Yeah, very creative name there. But pretty much they went on all sorts of interesting adventures and learning new things along the way, and also teaching kids Spanish at times. Now, don't get me wrong, I mean, that is a good skill to have, but why would kids need to learn Spanish at a really young age? Because me, I didn't really learn Spanish until high school, and I still can't speak it well, mind that. But whatever case, that's not really the only thing that I think was a little bit odd about the show. Another thing, now that I think about it, that's odd about the show is, think about it. Dora is a little girl, and her parents do not seem to care one bit, and don't even seem concerned that their little kid is going out into the world and could possibly get hurt or lost. And yeah, and honestly, in reality, if I was a father, I, you know, I'd be concerned for my kid going into the world alone. But do Dora's parents seem least bit concerned? No, not at all. They seem rather happy she's going out on her own. Then again, it's a kid show logic, so you gotta, kind of gotta excuse that. Overall, I can't rate Dora the Explorer very high. It wasn't really a show I cared too much about as a kid. But anyway, let's move on, shall we? Alright, what's next on the list? Alright, so the next show I want to talk about is called Oswald. Now, there's not really much to say about this show. Pretty much, Oswald was an animated show about a blue octopus named Oswald who was with a bunch of his friends, such as his pet hot dog Weenie, his flower friend Daisy, his penguin friend Henry, and the list goes on. And pretty much, this show was kind of bland in a way. I mean, there wasn't really anything super special about it. It was pretty much just a show about everyday life, with the exception of cartoon logic to make it more exciting. But still, it wasn't really much of a unique show, because it just dealt with everyday events. But whatever the case, that's really all I have to say about Oswald. I know there wasn't a lot to say about it, but remember, I am doing this off the top of my head, so I can only say so much. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Alright, the next show that I want to discuss is called Wow Wubsy. Now, much like Oswald, this is one of the weirder shows back on Noggin. Pretty much, Wow Wubsy was a show about a mysterious creature. I don't even know what animal he was supposed to be, named Wubsy, who pretty much loved to have fun, had a crazy tail, and usually spent every episode either hanging out with his friends or like exploring like curiosity or stuff like that. I mean, there's really not much else to say about that show, right? I mean, it had its random parts, and think about it, like his rabbit friend Widget was, this crazy inventor who a lot of times made like inventions that, were pretty cool, but also was questionable. Like, you, how would you make an invention that would actually change somebody? For those of you who remember episodes where she actually made inventions that actually did something very supernatural, then you know what I'm talking about. So, why would you have a friend like that? Kind of weird. And it wasn't even confirmed if she was adult or not. But anyway, that's really all I have to say about Wow Wubsy. It was definitely one of those weirder shows on Nick Jr. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, let's move on. Alright. The next show I want to discuss is Little Bill. And before or we even start talking about Little Bill, I want to say as a kid, I knew about Bill Cosby. I always thought of Bill Cosby as like, just a guy, because he always said like Little Bill was supposed to be how, or what represented how he was when he was 5 years old. And nowadays, when I think of Bill Cosby, I think of him being locked up. But I'm not going to talk about that much. Pretty much, Little Bill was another one of those shows that just kind of dealt with everyday life. Didn't really have anything super special. And the thing that I think was good about Little Bill is since it covered everyday life and didn't have anything supernatural or mysterious about it, it was kind of actually a good show because it actually could sometimes teach kids valuable lessons. And I think it was a pretty. I didn't watch too much of it, but I do think it was a good show, more or less. I kind of enjoyed it. Although there is a few things I want to discuss. First of all, unlike Caillou, for those of you who know Caillou, nowadays I hate that kid. He's a brat, and you know it. Thank God that show got canceled. But anyway, that's beyond the point. Let's get back to Little Bill. Pretty much. So Little Bill's parents were actually not sponsors at all. They knew what was best for or their kid and even supported his imagination. So that was good. But they also knew when to discipline him when he was nice. Nothing too serious though. However, if you ask me, I think his big sister April was a bad big sister. I mean, think about it. For the first thing, she actually encourages him to be mean on the episode called The Meanest Thing to Say, where he's playing ranking with a new student. And then in the episode called Number One Highland Street, she focuses so much on winning that it won't even allow her two brothers to have fun. Like, how bad is that? But but then again, Little Bill, it was one of those shows that some people didn't like, but I kind of liked it because it taught kids good lessons and it didn't have anything super out of the ordinary. So yeah, Little Bill, I'm gonna give that show a thumbs up. It wasn't the best show, but I did enjoy it. All right, let's see what show's next on the list, shall we? Aha. So, the next show I'm talking about is Maggie and the Ferocious Beast. And much like Wow Wubsy and Oswald, this is another one of the weirder shows. Pretty much, there's not much to say about this show, minus the fact that also kind of dealt with, not really everyday life, but pretty much, I found this out by looking up again. It's pretty much about a girl named Maggie who pretty much imagines a place called Nowhere Land, and pretty much she and her friends are, just having fun, doing everyday life things, and sometimes they learn lessons. Honestly, I don't know why this show was a thing, because I don't know what morals this show taught, but then again, it was a weird thing. Because, think about it, you have the thing called Maggie and the Ferocious Beast. Sure, the beast was ferocious at times, but in reality, he was just a coward. He got scared over the easiest, or of the slightest things, and sometimes was not ferocious at all. But then again, it's a kid's show. You can't really be too scary. Then again, that's all I have to say about Megan the Ferocious Beast. Not much to talk about. Anyway, let's move on. The next show I'm going to talk about is called Maisy And Maisy, this is another one of those shows that I didn't really watch too much as a kid, but I did kind of enjoy it whenever I did. Pretty much, Maisy was a very flat animated show. Pretty much, Maisy was about a mouse and had some of her friends. They just did everyday life things and had a little bit of, I guess, a little bit of imagination. But there's not much to say out of that show because it was just kind of bland in a way. Now, looking back at it, it does look kind of bland. And that's another one of the shows where the characters do not talk. The narrator does all the talking. But yeah, that's pretty much all there was to say about Maisie. But then again, I listened to the theme song recently, and the theme song actually does bring back memories, so that's always good. So Maisie, even though there wasn't a bunch of talk of the show, was it the best show? Nah, not a chance. But was it decent? Sure. I recommend it for little kids, if it was still on, that was. Anyway, moving on. The next show, I'm pretty sure a lot of you remember, even if you weren't born in 2000, you'll probably remember this show. And that show is Max and Ruby. Now, I'm discussing the old school Max and Ruby, not the new modern day Max and Ruby. Pretty much, in the old Max and Ruby, it was pretty much about two rabbits named Max and Ruby, who were like big sister and little brother. And pretty much Ruby was just kind of doing her own thing with life and making her own decisions. And Max, the little brother, he was a bit mischievous, but, there was actually times I actually agreed with Max much more than Ruby. Because, think about it. Ruby, sure, she was trying to be a big sister, but sometimes you gotta let your little brother try things on his own. And don't just assume things. Like, for example, she wouldn't even let him, like, have fun. Like, like, for example, I actually watched this episode today on YouTube, but for an episode called Max's Rocket Run, where they're wanting to go down the big hill, but Ruby wouldn't let Max do it because she thought he was too little or something. And then she gives him a hill that it's not even a hill, mind that. And Ruby and her best friend Louise, they were so scared of going down the hill. But honestly, this is saying something right here. Your little brother was more brave than the big sister. Like, what are the odds? Now, although I don't always agree with Max, there's a lot of times I feel sorry for him. Like, I thought, Ruby, have you ever thought that maybe your little brother doesn't want to do everything your way? But, then again, Max and Ruby, it was one of those okay shows. And yes, I know technically Max and Ruby did get a modern day reboot where Max actually talked in full sentences, but, I think the old school Max and Ruby was the better one, personally. But that's all I have to say about Max and Ruby. So overall, not a terrible show, but it could have been better. It just shows, oh, don't be a big sibling if you're, or don't be a controlling big sibling. Try to let your little sibling do stuff on their own and let them make their own choices sometimes. Don't be a mother hen. Yeah, no pun intended. Anyway, what's the next show? Oh, yes. So, the next show I'm going to discuss is Franklin. Now, Franklin, I know he did get a reboot show called Franklin and Friends, but I am just mainly going to discuss the normal, original 2D Franklin, not the three-dimensional Franklin. Pretty much, Franklin, looking back at it, I kind of like that show because, me being a Southern boy, and the show felt very kind of country-based. It was just about Franklin and his friends, like, dealing with everyday life and having fun at times. And this is a lot like Little Bill, where it didn't have anything really too out of the ordinary. But yeah, man, that's one of those shows that is mainly just there to teach kids about everyday life and how to solve problems or deal with something. But Franklin, it wasn't the best show. I didn't watch it too much, but it was still a good show. It was very kind of laid back if you think about it. But anyway, that's all I have to say about Franklin. So let's move on, shall we? Ah, yes, here's one of my favorite Nick Jr. shows, and that show would be Little Bear. Now, Little Bear, well, technically Little Bear is one of my two favorite shows on Nick Jr. Little Bear, I think me and my family can agree, Little Bear was an amazing show. Heck, even the Little Bear movie was really good. So, pretty much, yeah, I love the Little Bear movie, by the way. I saw it on YouTube again after so long. I even have it on DVD, and Little Bear was awesome. I like him. But pretty much, Little Bear was another one of those shows that kind of dealt with everyday life in a way, except, pretty much Little Bear was, he was, well, a bear, and he had a bunch of his woodland creature friends, such as, like, duck, hen, cat, owl, stuff like that. And, they just did everyday life, had fun, solved problems. Now, there were a few episodes that were kind of supernatural, such as like I forgot what the episode's called, but like where Low Bear plays with the constellations. But then again, a lot of the stuff was just imagination, and there's nothing wrong with imagination. But overall, I think Little Bear was a very, very laid back, calming show. It was very calming because a lot of these shows are energetic. This show was calming, so if you want to relax and enjoy a good show, I say Little Bear was a good one to watch. Overall, I'm ranking Little Bear a 10 out of 10. That's one of my favorite shows, and also, rest in peace, Maurice, the one who made the books of Little Bear. You will forever be remembered. Anyway, I know I've been talking for a long time, but there is still one more show I'd like to discuss. And this was my other favorite. This actually was my favorite show on Nick Jr. besides Little Bear. And this show was called The Backyardigans. Now, my grandmother, for some reason, took a lot of hate on the show. But me, myself, me as myself, I actually really liked the show. And I think The Backyardigans was a good show because it's the perfect show for imagination. Because pretty much that's all it's about. Pretty much the idea of The Backyardigans, it's about, like, well, I forgot how many members there are. Let me think for a quick second. Sorry. I'm going to be silent for a second while I count. Okay, yeah, so pretty much, I don't know why I didn't think of this off the top of my head sooner, but pretty much, it was about 5 different characters, and sometimes not every character was in the episodes, but pretty much it was about 5 different characters, sometimes mixed mash in random situations, pretty much all pretending to be a different character, and then, the episodes always start out the same way. They start out, in the normal backyard with like the character kind of explaining like what the idea behind the story is, and then they go into their imaginative world, and that's pretty much where most of the episode takes place, just doing like following the story and also doing music, like a big song in between parts. But yeah, so that's 2 good things about The Backyard. It was a musical show in a way, and it taught kids to use your imagination because the bigger the imagination, the better. And me, I have a very imaginative personality, so obviously that's why I like The Backyardigans. And also, some people think about what their favorite Backyardigans member was. That's easy for me. My favorite member was Austin the Kangaroo. I don't know why I liked him. He's just, well, I guess I had a dream about him one time and he became my favorite. But, yeah. Overall, Backyardigans, 10 out of 10. I know some people disagree with me, but I love the show. So, overall, that's all I have to talk about. I know I talked for a long time, and before I go, there is something that you might have noticed. Every show I mentioned was animated, and there were a few live action Nick Jr. shows I watched as well, but I don't really feel like talking them in this video, so that might be a part 2. But whatever the case, that's just what wraps up this video. So tell me, if you're someone who grew up with Noggin as a kid, then tell me, what shows did you like as a kid? So, do you like some of the same shows I did? Or did you like different ones? But anyway, that's just what wraps up this video. So, just to recap, my 2 favorite Nick Jr. shows were Backyardigans and Little Bear. And I might make a part 2 discussing live action shows. But until next time, this is Spirit the Alpha, signing out. I'll see you guys back in the